From Washington, D.C., I'm Ray Suarez, and this is Destination Casablanca 2008. With financial markets in the midst of a meltdown and the Congress feverishly working on a recovery plan in the form of a $700 billion bailout, there's another potential crisis looming just below the surface, perhaps in the not-too-distant future: Social Security. Some estimates show that there won't be enough cash flow to cover benefits by the year 2017. The next president will likely need to take on Social Security reform at some point. Both John McCain and Barack Obama have offered proposals that address that need, but how will their plans affect Hispanic retirees in particular, many of whom rely solely on Social Security to support themselves? Today on Destination Casablanca, Social Security. Here's some background. We've invited Israel Ortega, Senior Media Associate at the Heritage Foundation and Chief Spokesperson for Spanish Media; Gary Burtless, Senior Fellow of Economic Studies at the Brookings Institution. He's written extensively on the economic effects of Social Security, public welfare, and wage and income inequality; and Scott Frey. He's Senior Policy Advisor at the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. His expertise is health, aging, and retirement policy. Welcome, guests. Thank you for being here. And this is such a rich topic because for different Americans, how the future plays out is going to be very different. When we're talking about a population, Scott Frey, that during the working years is likely to make less money than the average American, how does Social Security work? How does it pay off down the line? Are these people who are getting a disproportionate return, or ones who could do better in another system?
Well, first, it's important to remember that Social Security was always intended to be a base of retirement income. That is, the guaranteed portion as you approach retirement. That the idea was to also that workers would have access to pension coverage and to personal retirement savings as they approach retirement to supplement Social Security. So it was never intended to be an end in itself, but a means of support. The fact is that younger Hispanic workers are less likely to be able to save, as your intro showed, less likely to have access to pension coverage. So Social Security becomes even more critical to them, that guaranteed inflation-adjusted benefit that they know will be there when they retire. In the event that they either can't save or do not have access to a pension, or in the event, as we see right now going on in the markets, total turmoil. About 50% of the private equity in this country today is owned by Americans over 60 years of age, and it has lost 23% of its value since the economic downturn. Therefore, a lot of seniors today are facing extending their working years and struggling to meet that. But for Social Security, most would be facing abject poverty. And this is no less true for the future of Hispanic workers in this country.
It's been critiqued as a very regressive tax on the people who depend on Social Security the most.
Well, and the other side of that is that Social Security benefits are structured so that lower wage workers get a higher benefit in retirement relative to their contribution than upper wage earners. There is already progressivity built into the system. Yes, the payroll tax is capped at $102,000. There's been proposals to raise that. It is below its historic level as a proportion of the economy. And obviously, Senator Obama has put that on the table, or at least a form of that on the table to build further on that progressivity of the tax structure and of the benefit structure. But I think it's also important to note that what workers get for that is a guaranteed lifelong retirement benefit that is inflation adjusted. And it's also important to understand that the alternative that has been put on the table of privatizing, a radical restructuring of the system and subjecting a portion of that benefit to the vagaries of Wall Street is not only unadvisable if you look at what's going on today, it should be evident, that, but it's also not a solution to the long-term budget problem. It actually worsens the long-term shortfall in Social Security by taking money out of the system that's currently promised for those benefits.
if all the workers today have their money just recycled, in effect, and sent out as Social Security checks to today's retirees, if they're saving a portion of that money, you make up the difference by what? Borrowing it, right?
Absolutely, yeah. But again, in order to allow younger workers to take as much as a third has been proposed of the current FICA tax out of the system and still hold harmless those who are currently in the system receiving checks, you have to create at least a $1 to $2 trillion budget hole that has to be refilled later down the road, and the only way to do that is by sharply and dramatically reducing the guaranteed portion of Social Security. Today, workers have, aside from Social Security, they may have a 401k that depends on market fluctuations. They may have a pension whose assets will be invested in the market. Their savings are in a bank that is insured by FDIC right now. We've seen a lot of bank failures. The only portion of that retirement that they can rely on to be there and to be stable is that guaranteed Social Security benefit. So the argument of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare is that at least we should not tamper with that benefit. And frankly, again, as I say, in the future, we ought to really consider whether or not there's a case for increasing that benefit down the road.
You know, one of the solutions that keeps circulating around and people take a look at it and it's becoming more plausible, I think, is raising the retirement age.
I think people can retire later, and I suspect that will be part of the compromise that does restore the full long-term solvency of the Social Security system.
If I could comment on that, I do think people understand now that the Social Security retirement age was raised already from 65. It's gradually going up to 67. Yes, there are some people in this country that can work longer and do work longer, and that's their choice. But there are a lot of health inequities in this country, still a lot of disparities in the healthcare system. Some people, frankly, aren't able to work longer. And I think the downside of raising the retirement age, which, by the way, is the least politically popular when polled among all of the options for extending solvency, the downside is that you will likely increase the cost of the disability program and the net savings to Social Security as a whole may be in question on that kind of a proposal. So there are a number of other options short of raising the retirement age that we think ought to be considered first.
But those people who work longer are also paying into the system longer, along with not taking a check.
That's true.
They're also paying into the system. Doesn't that help you balance out the numbers in a way that might extend that 2047, 2041 figure and move it later into the century?
Well, and that's exactly right. I mean, most older Americans like to stay active and want to stay active. The question is, should should it be mandatory that they work longer, when in some cases they may not be able to? And it's not a question of whether older Americans will work longer. The trend is already evident, and that does help the Social Security solvency over the long run. But we would seriously question a policy that would begin with looking at the retirement age. I do think it's very important that all Americans, but particularly younger Americans, understand the facts about the program, how it works, why it works, and how it is funded, and what the long-term problems truly are. We can't agree on a solution to the long-term solvency of Social Security if there is not agreement on the scope of the problem. And so I think an education process is warranted. There's been a lot of irresponsible rhetoric over the years, throwing around terms like bankruptcy when talking about this program that are just inaccurate. And frankly, it's, as I've said many times, it's going to be more vital to younger Hispanic workers in the future than it is to Hispanic retirees today.
Thanks for watching Destination Casablanca 2008. Please join us next week. I'm Ray Suarez.